Welcome, everyone. We have one of my favorite guests joining us this evening, Danny Hardeman with Blue Crown Properties, joining us for Real Talk, where we put the real in real estate. Danny, thanks for being here tonight, man.
Thanks for having me back. It's been way too long, actually. My
It's
gosh.
been a while. I think it's probably been a year, which is way too long. But I also think we've both had a stick of dynamite going at the same time with this crazy market. And so I think it's an awesome time to talk about all things rental market post COVID and catch up, because we had some awesome shows going through that you brought all the meat, all the reality of what was going on in the rental market during COVID. But now that so much has changed on the other end, whether it's been financial incentives and other things, I think we have a lot to talk about there. But we also want everybody to know we're going to just be talking about the state of the rental market in its entirety, between the increases in rents, different challenges we're seeing with HOA, so on and so forth. So we would love to have you guys chime in the chat. You will get the expert Danny Hardeman to answer in real time, and we'll do our best to get to everyone. So Danny, let's talk about first, we were covering so much about, the eviction moratorium and all of those other things and the challenges with non-paying tenants, which is a problem. What are we dealing with now as far as post-COVID issues and challenges across the board?
Yeah, first of all, we're trying to just pick up the pieces, so to speak. We've had, all of this assistance money has essentially come and gone. Most of those buckets are dry now. So I love how we're all using the word post-COVID, but it seems like numbers are going up again. But in the world of real estate, I think we are actually post-COVID.
Correct.
So now we got to just pick up the pieces and figure out where we go from here. So, all of that money seems to be gone. If there is any left, it's very, very little, and it's getting harder and harder to find. We still got properties out there where we've got tenants that need to be evicted. And so we're trying to get that backlog through the legal process now. So that's a major post-COVID challenge a lot of landlords are facing. I was sharing with you, in our pre-show meeting about, anecdotally speaking, we had very few evictions within our property management company, but we did have one client who filed an eviction. Now, state law says evictions should be held by law within 21 days of the date it's filed with the court. We got our court date 52 days after we filed. That's more than double. So you can see now, talking about cleaning the mess up, we've got this huge backlog. Now, not all the courts are like that. Some of the precincts are running a little bit more efficiently. This is just a very heavily rental precinct, and they are more than double the amount of time behind. So not only do we have the ability to evict now, thankfully, the problem is we still have to wait. So you still have owners out there that still don't have rental income and still don't have possession of their properties back. So I think that is the biggest hangover so far, post-COVID.
Were you the one? I think we discussed the fact that there were a lot of tenants that never had issues paying rent before, but that they got so much assistance, and they, instead of paying off other debts or anything else, that they continued to go further in debt when they were receiving assistance for the rentals. Was that you and I that were talking about that?
I don't think so, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that does sound familiar.
That was something else that somebody else was talking about. They were saying historically they never had issues with these tenants. Okay, now I remember. It was another investor who has quite a bit of properties across DFW. They were saying they were never late, never had an issue, but then instead of paying off debt to lessen their burden with getting obviously the rental assistance or the stipends or anything else like that, they just further went into debt, buying bigger cars, doing something else. And so then when the money was gone, all of a sudden they become delinquent on the rent because their other bills were sitting there staring them in the face, and they can no longer do that. And so he posed the question, do I, from a moral standpoint, do I turn around and evict them out of the fact of you put yourself in this situation, or because they've been a tenant for so long, do I give an opportunity to remedy the situation? But I think it really caused a lot of holes for a lot of people, landlords and tenants alike. because we've just never seen this type of capital infusion come to the American public in its entirety. But that's a completely different situation there. Let's talk about inventory, because I think that's the other thing that we're dealing with. I liked what you were talking about today, which was there's a lot of investors that are capitalizing on their equity in this marketplace, so they're selling off the properties. But you're saying there's not enough entering back into the market, isn't that true?
Yeah, so that's part of the problem here. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is, the landlords are getting a bum rap here.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been getting a bum rap since COVID, right? I mean, all of the support and all of the sympathy has been on the tenant side. It hasn't really
Correct.
been on, Joe owner. But what we're seeing, which is making these rents, and this is going to be an underlying theme of what we're talking about, Ashley, today is, why are rents so high? And part of that reason is inventory, right?
Yep.
The inventory, there's a lot of owners out there they're cashing out. I mean, everybody's property is worth exponentially more than it was 12 months
Yep.
ago. I mean, I'm sure you got your latest appraisals or your assessment values. Oh my God. Yay. On paper, I'm rich, but oh my gosh, think how much more tax I have to pay. But what we're seeing is a lot of these people are selling, they're cashing out, and those properties are being bought by owner occupants a lot of times. But what you and I were talking about today was the fact that interest rates are so ridiculously high. It's funny to say that. I mean,
they're still low in context.
In context.
Yes.
But what we've gotten so spoiled with is cheap, easy money, right?
Yes.
And so with these higher valuations coupled with the higher cost of money, these properties aren't cash flowing. So, they're not being put back into the rental pool, which is further lowering our inventory, which is causing rents to keep going up. Crazy.
Well, and I think that's, I work with a lot of investors, and we were talking about this, that, again, it's not charity. It's diversifying their financial portfolio. And again, right now with the volatility and the different financial markets, I mean, and real estate is still the safest investment that a lot of feel when they're diversifying, parking some of their money in there. But when you're looking at the numbers and you're talking about, and people don't realize that, one, you're required to put 20 to 25% down at a minimum, depending on what the property is. So it does take additional cash, with some don't want to put that in there. And then the interest rates, interest rates, I think, are hovering in the low fives right now for, primary residences. You're talking about tacking on another point on top of that for investors. Yeah. So even if you have great credit and everything else, you could be at 6.25 for that property. And then all of a sudden, with the exponential growth in the property taxes, you're not cash flowing at all. So, I mean, we've got to be very particular when we're looking at these properties, which means we're going heavily into rural areas to find lower priced inventory that's still going to be priced at the higher marketplace, just to be able to cash flow a couple $100 a month, to be able to set that aside when their taxes increase next year and their insurance increases next year. And I don't think that's what, of course the renters aren't thinking it that way. They're just thinking that the landlords are trying to be greedy, just like everybody else right now. But they've got to increase, and they're not going to bear the burden. The tenant is.
Right. And that kind of also plays into a little bit about what we learned today at our meeting. Matthew Church, the government affairs director at MetroTex, he actually put me on the spot. And
yes, he did.
Matthew, if you're listening, thanks a lot for that. Like I said in the meeting, I was told there would be no math. He asked me, he goes, Danny, how much do you think in Dallas County, how much of that rent is going towards property taxes? Like what percentage?
Yep.
This data, believe it or not, was from 2020. Okay, so it's rather old data. But even in 2020, 30% of rent was being applied towards property taxes.
Yep.
Okay, think how much different the real estate market is May of 2022 versus December of 2020, right?
Yep.
How much the valuations are. So I would easily wager that number's gone up, and that's Dallas County. And I don't have the numbers for Colin. I would imagine Colin is even a bigger percentage. Matthew was saying it's probably over 40%, in
The
some
one,
cases.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the rate of appreciation is higher. And Danny, by the way, we are getting comments. We're just not seeing them in ours. So I just pulled up my handy dandy phone. So if you guys see my eyeballs going down, I want to make sure we're answering your comments. But, the one thing is so prevalent right now is the fact that tax rates have come into the equation so much. So maybe, it's 30% in Dallas. And while Colin has increased so much, Colin's tax rates are, well, some of the areas like Plano, for example, is 2.1. Well, some areas of Dallas is 2.8. I mean, that's huge. And I think people just don't do enough research on that side. But gosh, a third of your rent is being applied to actual, property taxes. And that's why it's so important. We keep on going on this tangent. We're going to talk to a couple of people here in a second. But that's why voting is so important. Everybody gagged, screamed, cursed the last 30 days on their property values, especially landlords, because there's no exemptions for landlords. So they've just got to take the assessment and go forth and see what happens when the tax rates are set. But it's why it's so important for us to go and have these conversations with our local officials, because if you want more affordable rental housing sorry, we're technical difficulties, but we're fixing them. If you want more affordable rental inventory, then guys, you got to speak up too. Tenants have to show up at the polls. Tenants have to be having these conversations with the local officials as well. So that's my little tangent there. You've gotten a few shout outs because they said Danny Hardeman is the king of property management. So you've got some fans in there. Hey, one of them's Amy Carnes-Hanson.
Is that Amy? Oh
yes.
my God.
Who is also she's the queen.
Amy and I teach together, and yeah, we call ourselves the king and the queen.
There you go. And then Mary Fran said Danny is the king of everything.
Oh,
so
gosh.
Yes, of course. So you got your fan club here. But then Amy asked, is the lack of inventory pushing up the rental prices, which we just kind of discussed. And that definitely, I think, is happening too. Are you seeing your owners wanting to try to capitalize on the scarcity, or is it mostly coming from the fact that their expenses are going up exponentially year over year as well?
Yeah, so lease renewal process has been such a challenge, because historically speaking, we try to make it a win-win situation. And what we mean by that is we want landlords to incrementally go up, but we also want to try to reward a stable tenant, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to kind of keep them a little below, what market rate would be. Rents have gone up so much, so fast due to a lot of these factors. One of them is property taxes, that there's just so much sticker shock, out there, because the price that we're quoting to these tenants on their rental increase is not even full fare, right? It could be as $200, $300, $400, $500 a month, but if they say no, we're going to put it on the market $600, $700 more, right?
Yeah,
because we can, and it will go up. I promised I was going to share just a few bullet points, just for those of you watching our show today. Here are some just staggering numbers. Dallas County, this is April 2022 data. The median rent across all of Dallas County on single family is $21.95 a month. That's up 16% over last year. This is the number that really threw me off. Townhouses in Dallas County, median rent now $27.30, increase 24% over last year, just 1 year, right? Collin County, the same thing, 14% increase year over year on single family, 18% on townhouses. Denton's about the same, 17% and 18%. So, we're pushing rental increases, usually 10 to 12% across the board. And people are renewing because they have nowhere to go due to the inventory issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, like Amy has chimed in and said affordable rentals don't appear to exist in most areas, and they don't. Most people are having to push out into rural areas just to try to find more affordable housing. But guess what? Now, with gas prices the way they are, I mean, it's counterproductive. So you might as well stay put and be closer to, your nucleus and stay there and pay the rent. I think you said that every once in a while you get a lovely, hate response telling you to pound sand upon renewal. and you tell them to go check out what's in the open marketplace, and they go, never mind, I'll sign. And that's the hard part, and it's not making your job any easier. And the same thing for me as well. Whether it's helping somebody purchase, helping somebody find a rental, I never realized how hard it was until we had somebody from the Texas Realtors family reach out to me and said, Ashley, I trust you. I think there's a gentleman that's one of our field reps that his niece has paid several $100s in application fees just trying to find a rental. She's not particular. Would you talk to her? And really what she's trying to find something is in the HEB area, which seems to just be like lightning in the rental market right now. I know you guys do a lot in that area. Are you seeing a lot of growth there versus some of the ancillary pockets?
I mean, I wouldn't say it stands out over other parts of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay.
I think Dallas-Fort Worth as a whole, everything is pretty much the same. Everything is gone as soon as it's on the market. So I wouldn't specifically, dial it in just to HEB. It's everywhere.
How many applications on average are you getting on just a normal, let's say, I say normal, $1,800 to $2,000 a month property?
Well, first of all, like Amy just said, that's cheap now if you can find it.
I know.
I never in my lifetime thought the average rents across all of our markets would be above $2,000. That just blows my mind. I just can't imagine what the average, person, right? The average Joe, the average blue collar, how do they find places to live? You can't afford it. So yeah, you are talking about multiple application situations. You're talking about some of these properties that are getting into bidding wars, just like on the sales side, a tack that we use, because again, we represent landlords.
Yes.
If we get multiple applications, we'll go back to them and say, hey, give us your highest and best. What's your best offer? Right. I would not be surprised if the industry gets to the point where it's almost like an auction for a rental property. Right. I mean, that's how hot it is. But this is something you and I talked about, was this fallacy out there that, well, you're just, you're just taking in all these app fees, right?
Yes.
You're just the bad landlord. I think that was, I think part of the frustration that your contact was dealing with. And I think you had told me she was out a few $100s, like $600-700 or something worth of app fees. Yeah. I feel for her in that. But the truth of the matter is, we are not getting rich on app fees. Trust me on that. We are not. Okay. There's a lot that goes into processing an application. And if it's we've got 3 applicants and yours is not the best and most qualified, sorry, you're getting rejected and you're not getting an app fee back.
I think, Danny, that's the hard part, is that you have so many to choose from in certain scenarios. And it's not like you're sitting there processing 15 at a time, but once you process it and realize it's not meeting the minimum rental criteria for your client, you go, I'll go on to the next 5 that have submitted applications. And I think that's the heartbreaking part. So like Sherry Fierbacher said, the increase for tenants is often heartbreaking, but the landlords cannot be expected to carry the loss with tax increases. They do not have a duty to take the hit. And I think that's the narrative that we have to keep on discussing with people, is this isn't about greed. I mean, you can go to any store right now and see that prices have gone up, gas has gone up, taxes have gone up, insurance. We have paid out more insurance claims in Texas in like the past 2 years than ever in history. So that means the insurance is now going up on these properties as well. And I think that's the hard part. They might have a fixed interest rate, but those 2 portions are fluctuating year over year, and they're not going down, people. So that's the hard part. Heather Gill said, truth, people are throwing their fists up and yelling greedy landlords, when in reality it is more expensive now to own that home. And I think that's the hard part. It's just more expensive to live. It's not about owning or renting. Either way, it's more expensive. So quantifying, okay, do you want to rent? Then you're going to have to rent at a high stakes premium. Or do you want to turn around and enter this really aggressive, home buyer's market? But at least it's going towards, an asset that you own. And I know not everybody has the ability to purchase, but that's why it is still a good thing to think about from that standpoint. Go ahead, Danny.
I was just going to say, one of the underlying themes, if you guys haven't figured this out yet, is affordable housing inventory. These are issues that how do we get back to where there is affordable housing in DFW? How do we get back to where there is inventory? And part of another variable on the leasing side that some of our viewers may not have thought about was, the demand is there from the tenant side for these properties, but you have so many buyers that have been now completely priced out of the buying market, or they've just thrown up their hands because I've made 50 offers, I haven't got anything, I'm just going to rent. So you've got all of those people now looking to rent in addition to your traditional renters. So that's also putting a strain on our reduced level of inventory as well, which brings multiple applications to the table.
Yeah. And it's just insane. And then obviously we're going to go on to a couple different topics, but that's why everybody always, gets upset when they talk about, higher density projects and different things like that, townhomes, attached products, like the Collin Creek, project in Plano. I mean, that's going to be a mixed use development. We're going to see a lot more of that. But we've got to get creative in creating both rental and purchase product. And so we got to think out of the box. So when people are proposing this in your communities, really think about it, because we like to think about just, what do I like in my nice little house that I have with the roof over my head? No, I don't want high density near me. And no, I don't want this. No, I don't want my roads to be impacted. But ultimately, we got to think about our potential neighbors and the people that are moving to the community that can't afford or can't find places to live here. So we could go on and on about this, but I want to hit some other topics. So let's talk about the HOA challenges, because I think that's something else too that's impacting probably acquiring some inventory in HOAs. Give me a couple of things that you're seeing on your side with homeowners associations.
Well, homeowners associations, that's not a subject we really like in our part of the industry, is dealing with HOAs, but they are a necessary evil. Most of these newer developments have an HOA. This is also, from the leasing side, another part of the inventory problem, right? Is some of the challenges involved with HOAs. But the whole purpose of today's session is not just talking about inventory and what that, it's just the good, the bad, and the ugly on the leasing and on the leasing side of the real estate world today. HOA challenges are never going to go away. HOAs are always pushing the envelope to make it harder for people to rent their property. Yep. They are trying to strip away our private property rights. And this is something that we're constantly fighting, with that lobby to preserve those private property rights and have the ability to lease a house. But, some of the challenges we're seeing in the industry, one of them is they're still breaking the law in a lot of cases where they're still demanding a copy of the lease. Okay. That was changed. Senate Bill 1588 clearly stated, went into effect last September, they can't have a copy of the lease.
Right.
But some of where they're overreaching, in our opinion, is, they're requiring you to authorize. I'll give a shout out to Amy for this, because I think Amy shared this with me. She was dealing with an HOA that you are basically authorizing the HOA to be your attorney in fact, meaning if your tenant in your house violates any of the HOA rules, they have the legal authority to evict your tenant.
Insanity.
Can you believe that? That's insanity. So that's, that's obviously driving landlords out of the business if they're having to deal with that. You're seeing obviously a lot of caps on the number of rental homes and developments, which is understandable. I get that. That's also putting a strain on our side of the fence as well. And some of them are now trying to charge fees to property owners of rental properties. And these are not fees charged to owner occupants. Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable to me, right? I mean, that they have the nerve to even try that. So those are just a few of the obstacles that we're facing. Again, we have to live with them. We have to do business with them. But I think a lot of the things that they put into place are kind of short-sighted in what they're doing. And it's the old not in my backyard mentality as well, versus what's the greater good of the development as a whole and society as a whole.
Well, and I think that's the thing again, just thinking about, yeah, it's real easy to sit there and spout off as realtors and real estate professionals to say, guys, it's a slippery slope. If they start regulating one portion of your individual property owner's rights, that means they're going to start regulating other options or portions of it as well. And so that's why we're always constantly advocating that we fight against that, because you might not like everything that somebody's going to do with their home, but it's still their given right. They've now paid a considerable amount of money to own that property, and now they're being restricted on how they can utilize said property. So Heather Gill had a couple of things that I want to touch on. That she'd love to see old, outdated malls like Music City Mall turned into mixed use for families and senior citizens. There's so many wonderful things that can come out of a mix like that. And Heather, I think that is what's kind of going on with some of these older, indoor malls and different things like that, because that is a thing of the past. When you can do curbside pickup or Amazon, the traditional mall landscape has changed. So that is an opportunity to be able to create some different housing there. And then of course, Heather said another word, HOA, another word for control freaks. Yes, I think you probably have to take some sort of personality test to actually work for some sort of HOA or management company. So it's different for sure. It's like dealing with somebody at the DMV, I tell you. But those are all the things that are inhibiting us from being able to bring more product into the marketplace. So like it or not, we still have to figure out how to get more rentals here, because there's just not enough. Our housing is not just for ownership. Our housing shortage is also for rental product. So we need to continue to talk about that. Something else, talk about the fraud that you've been seeing. I mean, people are just downright desperate right now. What's some of the stuff you're seeing on your end?
Yeah, so Ashley and I were talking about this today, and I'm glad Mary Fran's on the phone, because and I have to give her a shout out. So Mary Fran Mulcahy, hi. Mary Fran is awesome. She's our senior property manager, and it came up in our team meeting this week that someone had put in their application, not on one of our properties, but on another property manager. Their application included an offer letter from my company that this person was coming to work for me. I was like, okay. And it was his offer letter. It wasn't signed by me. It was some other individual. So, and they had stripped away our logo, slapped it on there, and they put this in their application for some other property. How they decided to pick my company out of the blue, I don't know this, but where we're going with this is fraud is really prevalent in the leasing world right now. And a lot of that is desperation. These people are desperate, or they're up to something illegal. I think this person was up to something illegal. Obviously, for those of you on this call, if you're ever processing an application, always verify, okay? Don't take their word for it. You should be doing rental history verifications, and most importantly, employment verification,
right?
Because you need to make sure they can pay for this property. But we're also seeing an increase in fraudulent pay stubs more than offer letters. Believe it or not, I think there are, and I've never gone to this part of the deep dark web, but there's apparently websites out there where you can go get fraudulent pay stubs made, or you can simply make one, right, and send it over. So people are desperate. Rents have gone up so far, so fast. It's kind of like what you and I were talking about today, Amy, as far as, what is traditional for this market as far as a criteria is you want to see at least 3 times the monthly rent and income. Well, rents have gone up so far, there's a lot of people falling below that 3-to-1 ratio. And so what you're seeing is people creating fraudulent pay stubs to get them up above that number, because they're desperate. They need a place to rent. And so they're willing to do something fraudulent like that. So that is a big, big problem across the board. These people are getting more and more advanced in the way they do things too. Now, this knucklehead that tried to, get somebody hired by my company, his was ridiculous. And I wish we could patch Mary Fran on, because she had a really good time calling him and asking him what his license number was and all that. And yeah, it was pretty funny. So yeah,
that's pretty incredulous that they would do that. I mean, like, at least try somebody else that maybe has bad Google reviews that doesn't answer the phone or something, and somebody just gives up. But Wasn't their
But you know,
smartest
actually
move.
they covered their tracks too. You remember you and I were sitting in the meeting today and you go, what's their phone number? I'm going to reverse look up. We couldn't find them, remember?
This is
So they're
true.
even covering their tracks on the backside.
They are covering their tracks. And if
So
you can get past
trust but verify.
me, there is a problem. So
Well, they didn't get past Mary Fran, so I got to give her a shout
yes, absolutely.
out.
So that goes into something else, and that's pros and cons of self-managing, because this is stuff that you guys are now seeing. You're seeing the trends in the marketplace. You're seeing the things to watch out for. But you know, there's a lot of people out there right now, especially with the lack of cash flow that they're getting on their properties, and they're saying, you know what, I'm going to try to self-manage to save that property management fee. It's the same thing that happens, you know, on the traditional real estate side with sales and acquisitions, is the fact that, oh, hey, I've got the data now, right? We've got Redfin and Zillow and Realtor.com and all these other things, and then there's even self-showing, you know, services and things of that nature. So why do I need a realtor to buy a house? Well, I think you figured it out. That's not just what being a realtor is about. Same thing with a property manager. We have all these online cloud portals that streamline the process to collect rent, to communicate with tenants, so tenants can actually do repair requests, and they can sit there and do that. And then you've got apps like Thumbtack, you know, and things where you can sit there and dispatch licensed tradespeople a lot easier. But that's what apparently you're resigned to, is, you know, a rent collector and a maintenance guy. And what we've talked about right now, there's so much more complexity to what you guys do. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about, listen, I'm gonna be honest, there's no pro to self-managing. So let's just talk about the cons, and give some of those that maybe a normal person that is thinking, I'm going to try to self-manage on my own, that they wouldn't naturally think about off the top.
Well, I would say there is one pro to self-management, and that is they're saving the fee, right? But that is really a fallacy, because you
Yep.
know there is so much. I always, first of all, I think our industry as a whole, on our side of the fence, you know, the leasing and property management side, I think your average owner of a property management company or the salesperson does a very poor job of showing the value and what they bring to the table
Yes.
and why they're important, right? Because yeah, in a vacuum, it's a perfect thing, right? I'm a landlord. I just sit back, I collect this money, and that's it, right? No money ever has to go out, right? It's just I collect money and it's perfect. But that's not how it works. You know, that this is life, and there's a lot of variables that come into play. I always say what we do is glorified daycare. I mean, because it really is, right? But some days the daycare is on the owner side, not just the tenant side. You know, you heard all these horror stories. Let's just go back to COVID, right? During COVID, just being able to navigate all of these different pools of money, the average landlord couldn't figure that out. And you'd see, you know, CNN or, you know, whoever, and you know, it's clickbait. Oh, this landlord hasn't had money for 13 months, you know, and I'm sitting there scratching my head and going, you know, we've gotten all this money out of these buckets of cash because we educate ourselves and learn the process, right? But the average Joe doesn't really know how to do that. And so it goes back to, they don't know what they don't know. They're also tasked with knowing the laws inside and out. They can't use the excuse, well, I didn't know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The court is going to hold you to the same standard as they hold us as professionals. So, you know, what I always like to say is a good property manager is going to pay for themselves by what they bring to the table, how they save you money, and how they make your bottom line more healthy over time. But, you know, one of the biggest challenges that I see from people that try to self-manage is they have a heart, and because they're human. And I always tell people, don't feel bad because you had a heart. That means you're a good person, in my opinion. But this is a business relationship. This is an investment that needs to have a return, right? So it starts right off the top. We just talked about the fraud. The average landlord is not going to catch this fraud, right? The average landlord is not going to verify the employment. They're not going to possibly not even run a credit check, right? So that right there is starting off on the wrong foot. A lot of them still go by gut, right? The gut feeling. Oh, well, you know, they seem like a great person, and yeah, this looks like it checks out. You're in, right? And then they call us 6 months later. Oh my gosh, this guy hasn't paid me a dime. The place is trash. There's 10 people living there now. So, you know, that is part of what I think is a challenge of doing self-management. But some of the other things that I see that are challenging is not knowing what repairs are required to be done under what timelines, or if they have to be done at all. You know, that's always a problem that I see. And quite frankly, I think a lot of owners think they don't have to spend any money on their property, right? And so they think they're saving money by not doing the little things or cutting corners here and there. And then your tenant gets up and leaves on you, versus if they followed our advice, fix the property right, get a higher paying tenant, a more stable tenant, we're gonna keep that property leased at a higher rate more consistently, which is going to bring their return up. And the whole point of this is higher returns, right? So trying to save a few bucks on the front end, I think, is the most short-sighted thing that they do, because they don't really see the big picture as far as everything else we bring to the table. And I didn't even touch on how do they know how to process an assistance animal, right? They don't know what they can do.
Yeah, no, that's a whole nother, literally a whole nother animal, no pun intended. And you do a great class on that. That was fantastic, for an eye-opening for me a few years ago. But I think that's the problem, is that this landscape is ever changing. Property code, law, everything else. And you guys are going to be the first ones, when that comes down the pike, to start researching what that means, what the ramifications are, how you have to change your standard operating procedure going forward. And that's super important, because like Sherry Fearbacher said, the Texas property code is very fascinating reading material. And that's my favorite emoji right there, where it's like the face where you don't know if you're going to cry or laugh or anything in between. But it's very important to know the Texas property code. And I would bet that, unfortunately, most individual owners that self-manage have not familiarized themselves with that code.
I would wager they've never even heard of it.
I would agree.
Not
with
even
that.
familiarizing yourself. And you know, and that's the thing, is if you're one of these people that's just trying to save money and you don't know what you don't know, you're going to fail. You're flat out going to fail. You're going to fall on your face. And then you're going to realize a good property manager is going to make me more money over time.
You know, something else that you touched on was repairs. And so, you know, a lot of times when there's just a one-off repair, or these owners don't have relationships with trusted tradespeople, I mean, you guys have I'm sure a network of people that you're able to call when you have a specific need, where they know, hey, if Danny or Blue Crown Properties calls, you guys probably have preferred rates. You know, you do a lot of business with them. You have trusted professionals that you can dispatch. You know, kind of the realm of the cost to fix certain things at this point, I would assume. Am I off base there?
Oh, you're absolutely not. I'll give you a really great example that I share with a lot of our clients that are contemplating self-management. Let's go back to the ice apocalypse. What was that? February of last year? Was that?
Yep. Gosh, it seems so much longer ago.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you remember there was a big run on copper, and nobody could find a plumber, and pipes were bursting all over town. You know, I had people coming to me months after that still don't have their properties back together. Literally 6 months later, they're still in renovations because of the pipes bursting. We had every single property that we had a pipe burst, we had them all fixed within like 7 days, because all of our plumbers that we work with were dedicated to us. So we got all of our stuff fixed. But guess what that does? That strengthens the tenant-landlord relationship, right? So the tenant's like, man, these guys are awesome. They got me put back together. Nobody on my street is back together yet. I'm re-signing with them. So what did we just do? We made them more money. They didn't have a turnover, or they didn't have to move them out because the house is uninhabitable now, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's another part of it. And a lot of owners also like to just rely on, well, I don't need to have that. You know, I'll just get a home warranty on this house, right? Home warranties, I know on the sales side of the fence, they're very important to a lot of people, but they also help facilitate deals, right? They're on our part of the world, they're not made for rental property. And going back to that same ice apocalypse, we had an owner with a home warranty, and Amy knows I don't take home warranties, but we inherited this property as part of an acquisition. He wouldn't get rid of the home warranty. The tenant's heater goes out. We called the home warranty. They didn't get back to us for 2 days. Then when they finally came back, they said, well, the roads aren't good. We can't get there. We called the owner and said, oh my God, they haven't had heat for 3 days? Go send your guy. Guess what? We had it fixed within 4 hours. So, that's just another thing that, the short-sighted owners, well, I'm saving money, no property manager. Well, I'm saving money. I have this home warranty, but you're going to cost yourself a tenant there, right? In an instance like that, which is going to cost you more money. So.
Which I don't understand. So that home warranty that might or might not actually fix the repair. I'm not saying don't have it on there, but might or might not fix the repair. You're going to send $750 on that product. And then even the ones that fall out of the scope of the home warranty, you're going to be paying top retail pricing on all of that because you don't have a valued relationship with these tradespeople. One repair could be the difference of what your 12 months of property management fees would have been. And that's time and friction too. And then the legalities of it. We're seeing a lot of people, I think, are just in desperate straits. And I've told you, I'm hearing a lot more predatory language against landlords or people trying to find ways to say the landlord's being predatory or discriminatory or something else. I think I called you about, I had one gentleman that self-manages exclusively, and he does a really good job, but at the same time wanted to require that the online tenant cloud portal was the only way the tenant could pay rent. And I asked you, I said, Danny, just thinking forward, could this be something that somebody could say is discriminatory because you're only accepting this online cloud payment for payment on that? And what did you tell me?
Anybody can be sued for anything, but this is a term, if Amy's still listening, this could fall under potentially what's called disparate impact or disparate impact. It's an unintended consequence that impacts a protected class, right?
Yes.
So if you now I'm not saying don't do it. A lot of management companies require only online payments. We don't, but I think Amy's company and a lot of other companies do. But I mean, there's potential for that. There is a good savvy lawyer that could make a case that this is a disparate impact claim because predominant, protected classes don't have electronic banking abilities, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you could potentially be opening yourself up there. Small, but people have been sued for less.
Well, and that was the thing. So talking about that, we had an instance where, of course, self-managing. And if any of my investors are watching this, I do love you, but self-managing means you do it on your own. You don't call me every time there's a problem. So I'm just going to leave that right there. But when they do call, when there's an issue and they're, we're talking about it. Hey, the bank, they're saying it was the cloud portal didn't sync up with this client's bank because it was only an online bank and they didn't want to talk and it wasn't going through. And so it was delayed and then it was 7 days in and then it kicked it back. And so the tenant was saying, it's your problem, not mine. Here's a screenshot. And that wasn't necessarily the case, but they were using it to their advantage that, hey, you did this to me. And now you're trying to charge me a late fee and I'm just trying to charge my rent. I told you I just wanted to pay rent an easy way. And so that's when immediately, when I told him up front, he was one of the reasons why he was the guy I actually called you about. I said, this is what I was talking about. It's not always about whether or not it's illegal. It's whether or not it's going to put you in a precarious position. And now here we are. And so, because something else people don't know, if you accept even partial payment for rent, can you evict for that month?
Wow, we're getting way off the topic of hand today, but yeah, we can totally answer that question. So yes, but it depends. It just depends on your judge, right? That's going back to having a good property manager, right? Because we know the judges and the way they rule, right? Are they more tenant friendly? Are they more landlord friendly? Do they have crazy requirements like that? Meaning if you've taken partial rent, you can't evict. There are some JPs that are like that, but it just depends on the JP. But without taking that into account, the answer to that is you absolutely can. Because if they haven't paid a full month's rent, you can start the eviction process and you can file on them.
Well, that's good to know. No, that's good to know because I think that's the concern. But then you guys know like you said, there are different JPs that are more favorable to landlords. And that's something also when you're sitting there and doing your job and filing your evictions, you guys have to be aware of. I mean, you said the one that took twice as long, you could have potentially moved it, but it was maybe going to be a one-sided situation, and it wasn't what's going to be best for your situation. And so having that knowledge is everything. I didn't mean to go off topic on there, but those are just some of those perils, I think, of the self-managing, not knowing how to work the system. Tenants will sometimes pray, like you said, because it's you. There's no buffer in the middle. So there's no, it's emotional, and they sit there and they try to prey on your emotions sometimes. And I do understand. I mean, I think it's great that we can empathize, but this isn't a charity. And these landlords still have mortgage payments that need to be paid. So that's a big deal right there.
Well, and I'm glad you did bring this back up, because we're talking about, we started the show today, post-COVID challenges, and we talked about, some of these courts have eviction backlogs, but there are still landlords that are losing cases. They're getting to the judge, and they're losing cases due to some technicality, meaning, well, they've agreed to work with one of these assistants. They said they've agreed to it, but they haven't received any money. So the judge is saying, no, they won't rule in your favor if you've agreed to work with one of these programs, right?
Sure.
But there's another thing that we're seeing in the post-COVID world is tenant rights representatives are physically in the courtroom, right? So this is unbelievable, and a lot of these are the judge will start the hearing by saying, hey, we're going to let them talk, and they'll make a presentation to everyone sitting there. And I'm going, how is this fair and equal, right? I mean, you're giving tenants this little avenue right over here inside the courtroom, which was mind-boggling to me. So yeah, it is still a challenge as a whole, but it goes back to what you're saying, pros and cons of doing this yourself, not having that knowledge. It goes back to, have you ever heard the saying, you get so mad when, like, you send a plumber to your house and they charge you like a $200 bill, but they're there for 5 seconds, right? And you're just like, you didn't do anything. It's like, you're paying for my 20 years of experience to know to come into your house and do that. Yep. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for my 5 seconds on site. You're paying for all that education and years of experience. Same with surgeons or whatever trade you're talking about. And that also plays into property management. If you have a strong, experienced property manager that's going to guide you, their fee is so minuscule based upon all of the information and experience that they bring to the table.
Danny, I personally don't think you guys charge enough, but that's just me. I'm sure your clients don't want to hear that.
I 110% agree with you. I'm sure Amy would say the same thing. We take a beating for the amount of money that we've made, and we should have been paid triple to get through what we got through with COVID and ice-pocalypse.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. But you know what? Thankful that you guys are still here and realize that, through all the really rough times, it does even out. But man, how important it is to have professionals like you guys on the other side when we're talking about these are the places where people live, and it has to be taken a little more seriously. And the fact that you guys were able to jump in there and triage and get people back on their feet, that's also what a great way to show your value proposition, not only financially, but just, in a humane way. So, bravo to everything you guys are doing there. We are at the tail end. We've got about 12 more minutes. So I think something else that I wanted to throw out there on the coming out to paying attention what's going on. What is this new EPA lead-based paint renovation certification?
Just one more hurdle, just one more hoop we have to jump through. And this is another thing that essentially has caught our part of the industry. We were just blindsided by this. So what we're talking about is the EPA has had on the books since, I believe, the mid 2000s, I think 2008, 2005, somewhere around there, basically came up with what's called a renovation, repair, and painting certification that tradesmen, vendors, your make-ready people had to have if they're dealing with a property that was built before 1978, if they're going in and they're disturbing more than 6 square feet of paint, then they have to have this certification. And it's because, as we all know, I mean, lead paint is highly toxic.
Yeah.
It can cause tremendous issues, especially to young, adolescents. So, we've always had to engage vendors that have the RRP certification. What the EPA has decided is the people that hire these people now have to have the certification. This came into effect at the end of March. It's not so much a rule or a law. It's just they took it out of their guidance, and they basically now are including us in that same bucket of people needing. They're treating us essentially the same as the tradesperson, right?
Yep.
So the property managers now have to have this certification, which is something that none of us have because we never needed it. We were just hiring the person. So you talk about, the underlying theme today has been affordability, and so one of the things that our part of the industry has been thinking about is, well, how are you going to do this? Well, how are you going to, talking to each other, and are you going to charge your owners? Because now we have to go invest the time to sit through an EPA class, which I'm sure you guys know is going to be really fun, and learn about lead paint, which none of us have ever learned in any real estate class.
Sure.
And to get this certification. So time is money. How are we going to pass along the amount of time we have to invest plus this extra, process? There's a lot of people in the industry saying we're going to pass this along to the property owners, who in turn are going to do what? Pass this expense along to the tenants, which is going to do what? Another thing to bring rents up, right? So, this is something I think is very short-sighted by the EPA. I don't really think they thought this thing through, requiring us to do this, but I think an unintended consequence is going to be what I said. Rent may not go up a lot, but every dollar that it goes up is pricing one person out of a house, right? So, this is, just one more thing that we've got to do as property managers.
Well, Sherry's on a roll tonight. She said, what a joke, another 3-letter agency overreach. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think we're all just tired of it, especially on the real estate side, knowing the impact. And I think that's how we need to end the last few minutes of the show, is just talking about, again, the affordability. What can we do to try? I mean, we're not miracle workers here. We can't all of a sudden, it's not like Selena quieting a crowd like she was so good doing. We can't all of a sudden temper the rental rates. Let's bring them back down. That's not going to work. But what are some ideas that we can do to help mitigate, whether it's the rapid increases? Is it paying attention to the property tax rates when owners are acquiring properties? Is it advocating with our legislators? Is it encouraging people to still buy rental property? I mean, what do we do? Because it just seems like that scarcity and inventory is on every single quadrant of what we're talking about, and nobody can seem to find an answer yet. Everybody keeps on talking about we need to help the affordable housing initiative, both for ownership and renters, but it just doesn't feel like we're getting any relief. Is there anything that you guys have been talking about on your end?
Boy, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be the richest man in the world
right
now. I don't have any of the answers. That's way above my pay grade. But, I think where we need to start, and this is such a tired topic, property taxes. We've got to figure out a better solution to fund our state than just property tax. I know this state is 100% opposed to an income tax. I don't care if you're red or blue or purple, whatever color you are. But there has to be some other way to reduce these property taxes. For example, 2 of my personal rentals, I just got my new assessment. Last year, $220,000. This year, $315,000. Last year, $210,000. This year, $326,000. Obviously, I'm protesting, but I'm going to lose. We're all going to lose, right? Because the market is ridiculous. But I mean, think how much my tax bill has just gone up, right? I can't eat
$200 $200 a month? I mean, that's probably what you're looking at, on top of the fact that your insurance is going to go up as well, your insurance premiums.
But the thing is, we're paying full fare. Investors are paying full fare. There's no exemptions, right? Yeah. So we can't fall under these exemptions to soften the blow. So I don't know what we're going to do and what can be done. Again, this is way above my pay grade, but this is something that is just out of control. And, I think our legislators have truly failed us by giving us a lot of lip service and, these small things. I mean, yes, it's great that we increased the homestead. The homestead went from, how much did it go up again?
25 to, I think, 40 or 50
to 40.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a small little bump, but I don't think that's enough to solve the problem here. If we're going to keep it DFW specific, maybe we need to start looking at other markets. I think maybe Dallas Fort Worth we've got our big boy pants on now, right? I mean, this is what, a top 5 market now? I don't know what the latest is on it, but we've got to be thinking along the lines of, how are the bigger cities handling it? Again, I don't want to put politics in, because the bigger cities are primarily, left leaning. And again, I don't care. All I really care about is look at some of these other cities and some of the solutions they're coming up with. You're starting to see Austin's getting creative. You think our market's insane? Oh my gosh, yeah. Austin is off the hook. Maybe come up with, some sort of incentives to build, like, what are those things called? Small houses? I've seen small house developments, tiny houses. There you go. Tiny
house. That was a hard word, Danny. You went from small and you just couldn't figure out tiny.
Yeah. I'm running on fumes. Okay. Sorry. But Austin's coming out with whole neighborhoods of those container homes. I mean, I know we're talking extremes, but we need to start thinking outside the box, because where we're headed and as much growth as we are experiencing, this problem's bad now. Just wait until 5 years from now. Oh my, think how far we've come in 2 years.
Yep.
Right. So I didn't give you an answer because I don't know what the answer is.
Well, and I think that was the point, though. I mean, we've got two real estate professionals here, one from the property management and rental side, and one from, primary residential real estate and investment real estate as well. And I think the answer is, when I had several people literally either calling me crying or screaming, I had an email with expletives on the other side that wasn't at me. And it was just, screw this, screw that, F this. I guess I just have to move. I'm being taxed out of my house, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, I think it's great because he's from New Jersey, and so am I. So I know my fellow New Jerseyan, and he just needed to blow up some steam. And the wife came around, on the other side of the email, was like, just don't mind my New Jersey boy, but we are frustrated, and what can we do? And every time I tell them, you guys have to speak up before you just get your assessments. Like, you just have to have a conversation. You need to get your neighbors to speak up. And what I'm really tired of hearing are clickbait and wedge issues in local elections. We're used to seeing that in national elections, but we deserve better in our local elections, because we need to be talking about this more so than anything else, guys. Property taxes, because it affects every single person, renter or property owner. So if you don't think that's the most important thing, then you are wrong, because if we don't have shelter and we don't have affordable housing, we can't do anything else for our family. So it all starts there. So hold them accountable, start having conversations. And when you're going to vote, ask the right questions. And when somebody tells you that they voted to not increase your tax rate, that doesn't mean that they didn't increase your taxes. Stop falling for that garbage. That just means that your tax rate stayed the same while your values appreciated. And if you think the appraisal district that is tasked to assess your property at market value is the demon, they're not. Because we had Brent South on, who is the chief of, the appraisers for the state. He said, look, if they come and tell me only appraise that 30% of market value, I'll do it all day long if that's the solution. But then in turn, still remember, the budgets have to be funded. So then they're just going to raise your tax rates. So right now we're in this cat and mouse game. Nothing's happening, but we need to continue to have these conversations for our landlords, for our renters, and for our individual property owners.
Amen, Ashley. Couldn't have said any better than that.
Well, sometimes I just like to preach, and it's 6:29, so I think it came at the right time. And thank you, Johnny, for posting that article in the chat. Unfortunately, we can't see it on our end, So Dallas deemed the #7 U.S. housing market for growth and stability. But understand that growth and stability. And I think that's what people have to understand too. We've grown a lot, but we still actually are one of the most healthy and stable economies. So we just have to figure out how to keep our good people still living in their homes and being able to have affordable and quality housing here. So let's keep the conversation going. And you know what? Oh, Amy Carnes Hansen. No, she said, Ashley for president. I am not doing it. I will settle for president of Metrotex. How's that? I'm just gonna settle. I'm gonna settle for that.
We will gladly take you.
Okay, well that's good. Well, Danny, we're right at 6:30. Is there any parting words that you would love to leave our guests with?
I think you nailed it. But I think one takeaway that we always need to remember as agents is, realtors, people just think that we're all about home ownership, but the realtor party, so to speak, we're there representing tenants as well. So, you need to educate your clients if you're representing or working with tenants, that we're working to protect private property rights, and we're working to come up with affordable housing solutions. And we're asking those tough questions, when we're interviewing people running for elected office, because this is a problem and it's not going away, but we need to all work together, keep voting and doing everything we can to drive that discussion to keep coming up with affordable housing, or Dallas Fort Worth is going to be in a bad place.
I would agree with you, sir. And we had a lot of people saying, thank you so much for a great show tonight. So we appreciate for all of you tuning in. And appreciate you staying on with us. And of course, you can share the replay, tag your friends in the comments so they can check it out as well. Hey, share this with your investor clients that like to self-manage. I'm going to do that later. But have a great evening. And Danny, we will definitely have you back very, very soon. It won't be that long next time, I promise.
I love it. Ashley for president.
We'll see you soon.